us from overseas and from here in Australia. Hi, everybody. Let's see. Up on top, that'll be Adelaide, right on the top left, right? We've got the Wellington Focolare in the top middle. Perth, obviously, over on the right. Hello. They'll be back. Yeah, there we are. Now, this is Fielding down here, lower left. And who can tell me that's Rotorua, lower right? Is that right? Am I right? I am right. Okay. Is that everyone? Fantastic. Yeah, so my name is Tommy Hartman. I live in New Zealand, which is why I know how to say all those places. It's a wonderful place, but as you can hear, I'm from North America originally. We thought to contribute, and I wrote it, and I'm joined here by some excellent folks. Chris Holmes is on trumpet here. Thank you, Chris, for being here today. Lenny Goodhart is on bass, and we've got John and Monica Thompson also helping here, so it's all in the family. Window. It's all about a light coming into the wind, but I think after the experiences of this afternoon, we're going to find that there's a lot of light that comes out of these windows. And that's probably all I should say. 2, 3, 4. The tear stealing down your cheek. It fears a world you've simply lived too long. Yet it tells me it's time.
Tells me it's time.
Tells me it's fine to tell you I love you. 'Cause while the wounds are hurting, lonely place to be, it remains somewhere where love can still be given and received. Your wound is a window. Your wound is a window. The tear rolling down my cheek. It fears a world I simply don't belong. Yet it shows me a wound.
Shows me a wound.
Shows me there's room to show you I love ya. 'Cause while the wounds are hurting, only place to be, it remains somewhere where love can still be given and received. My wound is a window. And my prayer today is that we may let light shine in, let light shine in to this window. And as our tears flow toward the sea, they fear. And we wish there were a river that we could skate way on sometimes, but and I see divine,
I see divine.
I see design. So late have I loved ya, 'cause while the wounds are hurting, lonely place to be, it remains somewhere where love can still be given and received. A light shining, the 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 light shining. Let the light shine. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. That was great. Great way to start off the second session this afternoon, where we'll be focusing on the Cube of Love. So, Tommy, do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah. So many of you will be familiar. How's this? Is this all right? Come here. Come here. Many of you will be familiar with the Cube of Love already. It started as a tool for children, actually, but it was based on Chiara's ideas about the gospel-based art of loving. And figured out if you have 6 different points, you can put them on a cube or a dice that can be rolled, and the kids would roll it, and then share experiences of trying to live each of the points. But the interesting thing about this cube is the adults have also latched onto it, and cubes have been developed for all sorts of different environments. So we've got one for the business community, for example. At work, you can roll a cube that's been adapted to the business environment. And here, we're adapting one for the health environment. Now, do you have all the 6 points that we, let's see.
The 6 points, yeah. Care for everyone. Share others' hurts or joys. Be the first to care. Let go and be ready to listen. Love your enemy and care for each other.
And so this is the first prototype, am I right? So the artists from our community have put together some great designs. And for example, this one is care for everyone and each other, this side. Here, I believe love your enemies will be on this side. No, share the other's hurt or joy is here, is what we're looking at here. So I assume we've got some plans to mass produce these at some stage, but we're working on developing it. Yeah.
Work in progress, yeah.
So what we're going to do now is have experiences on each of these points.
So we'll begin with a video record of Rima and Assad from Perth. So they're married and have 2 beautiful teenage children, Paul and Stephanie. And they came to Australia after founding the large community in Syria. So Assad has MS and coordinates a cultural transition program at Assets, which provides services to people who are survivors of torture and trauma. And Rima is Assad's main carer and works at the Disability Service Commission in WA. So let's listen to their experiences.
Great, thank you.
When I was young, I used to work with the Legion Marie, and we used to visit hospital, we visit the sick people and sit with them and share. And one time I asked one sister, how you spend all your time here in the hospital on with the sick people? Why you are doing that? she said, I am following Jesus, what he said. I was sick, you come visit me. I was hungry, you come and give me something to eat. So when I see any person with sickness, with that, I see Jesus. So here it changed a lot in my life. So Jesus present in everyone, sick people or not sick, hungry or not hungry. So I start with this to see everywhere where is Jesus. And when my mother has started, we know she has MS. Also, I feel how this sickness attacked my mother, but my mother was so calm, and her love always with us. Her smile is so big, and she said to us, we'll see what Jesus wants. When anyone comes to visit us, before the person asks her, how are you? She asks them and she smiles with them and welcomes them. She spent 20 years with MS. No one saw her one time blaming. That for me is a miracle. That is Jesus' light in her body, in her face, in her spirit. So I think when that experience told me, if something happens to you, but also God give you another thing to see how you can deal with it. And that is the experience I saw. Even, for example, when we start to work with L'Arche, with Jean Vanier, and we know L'Arche is a community of life for people with mentally handicapped. When they come to the house of the community of El Safina, I feel this experience very strong also. They are open to love everyone, and they give love to everyone before any person gives them love. And you forgot they have handicap or not. You see them as a person first. Because Jean Vanier said, everyone has handicap. Maybe these people, their handicap is shown, but our handicap is hidden. So we must see the person, and we must see how Jesus is present in this person.
I guess my journey with suffering and disability has been a journey and a struggle, and it still is. And I often think of Mary and Martha, who were talking to Jesus, and how Martha was preparing the meal and being active, serving Jesus, preparing everything. And she complained to Jesus, like, tell Mary to come and help me. And Jesus told Martha, well, Mary has chosen the better part. And it's probably about being and doing. being with the person and doing for the person. And I remember vividly the first time that my mother asked me to go help her friend who had 2 adult children with disabilities, with severe disabilities. And I told her, look, I can't go and stay with them. There's no way I can stay with them. Tell your friend I'm happy to do the shopping, to do errands for her, to do whatever she needs, but I can't stay with her kids. That's not something I can do. And a few years later, I traveled with the United Nations to Aleppo, and I met people from L'Arche. And the Little Sisters of Jesus had asked me to come to a meeting to translate, to interpret in the meeting. And the meeting was held at the house of a pharmacist, a chemist, who had a young daughter, around 10 years old, Rita, who had severe epilepsy. So her epilepsy was not controlled despite the numerous efforts of everybody around her. So she had frequent falls, and her face, her hands, her body, you could see the effect of it on all of her physical being. She had lots of deformities in her face, bumps from the falls, her eyes were blue, and physically she was not very attractive. But what was amazing for me was to see that this young girl was so intuitive. The meeting was taking place in her house, and there were lots of her parents, friends and family, and lots of people around. And there were those 2 strangers, those 2 French people from L'Arche who were sitting, who she had never met before. And everybody was trying to call her because she wouldn't sit still. She was walking everywhere. And I had my heart in my hand thinking, oh my God, she's going to fall. Oh my God, she's going to fall. And everybody was calling to her to come and sit next to them. And yet, she went and sat next to the younger gentleman from L'Arche who didn't utter a word to her. And at the time, I thought, I don't know how, but she knew that he was closer to her than a lot of the other people in the room, although he didn't speak the same language. But in his presence, in his being, she could sense something that was attracting her, to him. And this was the start of a journey of discovery for me. Through Rita, I got to know a little bit more. I read more of Jean Vanier's books. I heard him talk about the Beatitudes and how the poor shall see God. I could see a little bit of what Assad was saying, is that the people with intellectual disability, especially, or physical disability, but coupled with intellectual disability, because these were the people that I had met at the time, seemed to have a direct connection to God, where they can tap into people's hearts, into people's souls, almost. And that intrigued me, really. And so my journey started, and then eventually I left my work and I joined L'Arche. And I went to live in house with people with profound disabilities, multiple disabilities. And the same journey continued. I was with people who were nonverbal, whose body language was really difficult. And yet, I was taking Francine to Mass almost every day. And Francine could not coordinate her movements at all. And yet, when we went to Mass, all of a sudden she stilled, and she sat erect like a rod, really straight, although she was sitting between my legs. And there was a peace and a meditation and the presence of God that was there so strong. And when she was taking communion, I could see that, I could feel that. So the people with a disability have led me on a journey to discover what is behind the outside, what is the innermost important part of a human being. And this journey has taken lots of ups and turns and whatever. And when I came to Australia in my latest work, I started a project to help people who had received the service from the Commission, from the state, to transition their services to private providers. And that's how I met Mark. And Mark had an acquired brain injury. And for 40 years we had provided services for him that hadn't really tapped into his core need, because he was still very lonely. He was still depressed, although not in a depressive state. He was sad because he was lonely, and he couldn't remember the people he met. So it didn't matter how many people we put for him to come and visit him. If he couldn't remember that they came and visited him, he still felt really isolated. And that led me to really try to see how we could resolve, or how we could address his need for relationship, for socialization, for being with other people. He was a lovely gentleman. He is a lovely gentleman, and he took me on a long journey. And gradually we found ways through cognitive training and other things to overcome his difficulties. But I am faced every day with the challenges of how I relate to him and how other people relate to him. Am I seeing the person? Am I connecting with the person inside? Or am I letting the disability be the guide in my relationship? And I find that I get really upset with some of the carers that treat him as if he didn't understand, as if he was not a person, because he has a disability, while he's perfectly capable of knowing his own mind, knowing his own wants, and he just needs support in certain things. So for me, this is a daily challenge. How can we as a society look at the person and not at the disability? How we can see God in the person? How we can let God in the person reach out to us, because that can take us on a very long journey.
Right, so those first two experiences are on the point care for everyone. Now we're going to move on to the second point, is share others' hurt or joy. And I'd like to invite Anne Shepard to come up here now. Anne has suffered from profound hearing loss since she was born, and is going to share with us an experience with your mother as well, who's going to appear by video.
I was born 14 weeks premature, a miracle back in those days, as I weighed only 3 pounds, 3 ounces. Medical staff told my mother that it would be a slim chance of survival, so my mother called a priest to baptize me. Surprised that I was alive at birth, I was placed in an incubator for 4 months. It was during this period that I was given too much oxygen, which damaged my hearing. I have about 20% hearing in both ears. Growing up, I remember asking my parents, why didn't I die at birth? Why do I have a hearing loss? They always told me, God loves you immensely, and He has a special plan for you. This always left me curious, and it encouraged my heart to always be open, to understand what He had in store for me. I remember my first job when I was 18 years old. I worked in the post office. In this role, I had to answer the phone. Back in those days, I had a gadget that you had to slip on the earpiece of the phone to amplify the sound, and then take it off for others to use. I hated the phone as it was very hard to hear, and many times people on the other end would tease me saying that I was stupid. It wasn't until I would get home that I would let out all my tears and bang on the wall in my bedroom in anger. I remember crying at my mum saying, "Why me? why am I deaf? Why does life have to be so hard? My parents as a couple tried to live the life of the Fokolare spirituality. I remember my mother saying to me, be the first to love. When you go back to work tomorrow, be the first to pick up the phone and explain that you have a hearing loss. Can you please speak slowly and clearly? Up to that point, I didn't want anyone to know that I had a hearing loss because I wanted to be normal like everyone else. The next day at work, I heard the phone ring. At the same time, I heard that voice within my heart saying to me, be the first to love. For the first time in my life, I picked up the phone and told that person that I had a hearing loss. Can you please speak slowly and clearly? Surprisingly, that person was so nice and understanding, and this encouraged me to always pick up the phone. My colleagues at work could see that I was always answering the phone and that I had to take on and off the gadget for every phone call. Seeing this difficulty, they started to pick up the phone before me. It was like I had thrown a pebble in the water, causing a ripple effect. I had started to love first, and then the others started to love me back. It became reciprocal. I remember going home, saying to my mum, it worked, it's true. That experience was a turning point in my life. I understood that I had to accept my disability, my limitation, and only in loving I would find peace and freedom. Even today, I still find it hard at times. When people turn their back while talking without realizing it, and I cannot understand the conversation. Or when others laugh at something funny and I didn't hear it. Sometimes I laugh anyway or smile, even though I didn't hear it, so as not to make other people feel uncomfortable. Sometimes I ask too many questions to find out what's going on around me, and this can make other people go crazy. This too is hard, as I have to find the right balance, when to ask or when to let go. I have found that when I do miss something important, I do get to hear it later, and it gives me peace. Even with my friends whom I live with, we've had to learn how to live with each other. For example, I had to tell one of them, who mumbled a lot, to open their mouth a little more so I could lip read. It was an effort for her, but she's much better. Suffering does bring you closer to God. Sometimes when I don't hear something or get frustrated at my own limitation, I say, I love you to Him. In this suffering, accept it and plunge myself into loving in the present moment. Sometimes I don't always make it, but I always try to start again in loving. I wanted to give my life totally to God in the Fokolare, but I had a problem, as the formation in Italy was all in Italian. How was I going to learn a foreign language with a hearing loss? Already, to be able to speak English well, I had to do a lot of speech therapy, and my mum taught me how to lip read. But nothing is impossible to God. He has given me a special grace to be able to speak in Italian, even lip read in Italian. Don't ask me how. It's His gift to me, and I only wanted to follow Him. The theme today, From Darkness to Light, brought back a special memory I had with my father when he passed away 9 years ago. He gave me a personal message to open after he had died. He wrote to me, "My night has no darkness." This is so true. When we love, there is no darkness, even with a disability. Thank you.
Hello, Mrs. Shepherd, Eleanor Shepherd, or my mum. Now, I've got a few questions to ask you in regards to Anne, your daughter, and my sister, in regards to her hearing disability right from the beginning. So the first question is, how did you feel when you first found out about Anne's hearing loss?
Stunned and shattered. And I remember being in this office and being told, and walking down onto St. George's Terrace and standing on the road thinking, her life is totally in my hands, whether she has a life or not because of me. And there was a huge weight. And I thought people are just walking past, they have no idea what it's like.
So what was it like when you heard she may never speak?
Well, I suppose in one way, I always thought she would. And so I lived my life like that, living towards and talking. I remember being told, keep on talking, it doesn't matter if she doesn't hear anything. And when she was born, she was totally deaf. We could bang saucepan lids just out of view, and her eyes didn't even flicker. There was absolutely nothing if there was a crashing sound. Nothing got through.
And who inspired you through her deafness to keep going?
Well, as I said, the Spencer Tracy Clinic, that was the main actual source. I suppose I had my faith too, but if you want practical things, you have to go to practical people. And there I got all the inspiration and the knowledge and the exercises that I was given to help her.
What life lesson did you get from having a deaf child?
Oh, that's a life lesson. I suppose to have compassion, to understand what it's like to have a child with a disability. But the very main thing is they are a child. First and foremost, they're a person, they're a child, and then they happen to have a disability. And I think I always treated her that way. Because I remember when I used to take her swimming classes, I never told the instructor that she was deaf, because she was a good little athlete. And so she would go without her hearing aids for the swimming. And because she had enough, could use her eyes and everything, and she was very good, she soon picked it up. And then I told the instructor, because it makes a big difference with someone. If they think someone's got a disability, they treat them in that way. If they don't, and they needed to get to know Anne as a child and a little girl first, and then she had a disability. And I think that's always been my main thing.
Thank you very much.
That's okay. And I must say she's grown up into a lovely young woman who is just wonderful. But we were lucky because the other children in the family all supported her, and so did my husband very much. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Anne and Eleanor. And for the third experience, to be the first to care, just like to invite Rob and Chris up here, who they're from Melbourne and have a very strong experience about a troubled teenager.
Just telling Anna I forgot we were different heights. when Tommy was talking about all those things on the cube of love, I thought, my goodness, they're all in what we've been living, and I never realised it. But when they asked us about this experience, I thought back to sometime over the Easter season this year. One of the words of the gospel jumped out at me, but I heard it 1,000 times before, but this time I heard it a different way, sort of back to front. I think I'd had a micro sleep during the sermon and woke up in the last half of the sentence and take the first half on afterwards, because what I heard was, as I have loved you, love one another. And I've thought about this an awful lot since, because, and I've started to understand what incredible wisdom there is in it. Because first, God's loved me, God's loved us. And then we've learned how to go out and love somebody else, and that person who's loved by us, by anyone, they then recognise love, and they can, take the next step and love. But you've got to be loved first. And if you're loved unconditionally, that's something stupendous. And Rob and I want to share a domino experience of this love that in our lives that we've lived together with our family.
At the beginning of the 2002 school year, our son came home from school after the first day in year 11, and he said to Chris he wasn't going back to school. He said he couldn't stand people. It's a pretty strong statement. He disappeared silently into his room for a year or more, coming out only when he thought we were asleep. He withdrew from me entirely and only talked to Chris pretty sporadically. I felt completely abandoned and lost, but somehow Chris's love managed to help me to accept the rejection and to remain calm and keep silent. And that's important, keeping silent. To fit myself where my son obviously wanted me, don't speak and do nothing role. Not very easy for me, I can tell you. One night, he made a pretty desperate decision to commit suicide. As we called an ambulance, he climbed out a window and ran away. The next hours were a blur. The ambulance arrived, but there was no Ian there. Police support arrived as well. We had a command post set up in our driveway, coordinating a search of the area. He eventually came back, thanks be to God. I don't know that we'd have found him hiding in the dark. He was rushed to hospital for treatment. In a week in hospital intensive care, for someone stricken with panic and terror of people and places, it's a pretty scary place to be. Night after night and day after day, we slept in shifts. One of us would be there whenever he awoke. That night shift was the only concrete love I could offer it. I could at least be a presence if needed, something I know that he later understood. When he came home, we thought we could continue this 24-hour suicide watch. But pretty soon we had to accept our own human limitations and found it was impossible. Together we prayed in a new way, seeking God's will. Together we offered and entrusted to God, pardon me, our son, his son, accepting completely that we could not prevent him trying to commit suicide again. I remember well the fear, the pain, the emptiness, the anguish, the hopelessness of that time. And then, in my absence, acceptance of this terrible role, the feeling of a real union and peace with God and with Chris. In the year that followed, we managed to get him to reluctantly agree to enter a day program. We hung in with the background support role, and I think that God did the rest, from the mundane of our ever-extending health insurance cover to the miraculous, an incredible group of fractured kids who supported and lived for each other.
One of the girls in the group, with her multiple challenges, not the least of which was drug addiction, became part of our family life. And as time went on, she and our son drew closer together. She hung in with him and helped draw him through his very, very anxious times. And he stood by her rugged attempts at drug withdrawal. But it wasn't easy.
No, one night a few years later, when Chris was away interstate, our son's girlfriend turned up at the front door in a highly agitated state. That triggered an absolutely massive argument between our son and her. Whilst this was in progress, the front doorbell rang, and to my amazement, 2 paramedics turned up. A couple of moments later, 2 more. Very shortly after that, we seemingly had the whole police force of the Hampton and Sandringham and Moorabbin area in the house. But they were there to calm the situation, allowing the paramedics to actually treat her and get her off to hospital safely and stressed safely. Afterwards, our son told me about his stand on drugs and his abhorrence of them. He told me that he'd called the ambulance and the police because he knew the situation was way beyond either of our ability to manage. He broke off their relationship after this drug incident, but over the following weeks, he became once again isolated, deeply sad and lost. That spark inside him had been extinguished once again. And with it, Chris and I also experienced a great loss. But slowly over the period after release from her months of involuntary hospitalisation, they tried again and worked at rebuilding their relationship on a firmer no drugs foundation. Eventually, they decided to marry.
But as everyone knows, wedding preparation is a pretty stressful experience. And our soon-to-be daughter-in-law was still working in an environment where drug taking was a common way to cope with life. So the inevitable happened, and our son rang me a month before the wedding, and he said bleakly, "Mum, she's on ice again. What will I do?" And my heart fell through the floor and my brain went blank. And I've since decided that a blank brain is an excellent thing to have because it leaves a lot of space for the Holy Spirit. That's the only way I can say it. So I said to him, "Well, I can't tell you what to do. Only you two have the grace for that. But I can tell you one thing. If you look into your heart and you see that you've loved wisely to the very, very end, that tells you that it's time for your part to finish." I said, "But if you look into your heart and you see there's even the smallest bit more of wise loving you can do, then you do it. You keep trying." And there was a long, long pause and a deep, deep sigh. And he said, "I guess I can love a bit more." And So they sought together. Given the impossibility of getting into a drug rehabilitation place before the wedding, they'd work at getting into rehab after they came back from a very short honeymoon. And that's a whole other story. It involves us discovering the fact that very few drug rehabilitation places will take ICE users because of their OH&S policies. It involved, our daughter-in-law giving up work to steer clear of her former drug links, and consequently running out of supply, which you may be aware is pretty catastrophic, and our son, to protect her, going out to buy more ice to keep her going till they could find somewhere, and I think my mind boggles at that. With my stand the same as our son's, would I go out and buy ice to love Rob? I'd have to find out how to do it first, which I understand our son had to too, But he did it. He did it for love of her. And until eventually, they got her to the right point. They found a place that slipped her sideways, a really, really good drug rehab place, slipped her sideways into their system, and it was an extended live-in program and had fantastic ongoing outpatient support systems. Now, it's 18 months down the track and she's still clean. And, that's a tribute to her continuing efforts working with her counsellors, but fuelled by her incredible love for her husband, our son, whose stand has given her, and his love has given her such strength in this incredible task they've set themselves. And, so his extraordinary love for her through these struggles as well. And we're so very proud of both of them. And it's been a really long road for all of us. And I suppose that we'll all travel it for the rest of our lives. But what I've seen shining through all the tears is that God's love for Rob and me gave us the wisdom and the strength, because it's not easy to love our son in the way he needed. Didn't suit us, but he needed it. And we loved, honestly, we loved to the end. And it may be our love showed him the way to love his wife in just the way, with just the strength that she needed, that was just right for her, tailor-made for her, and that his loving, his strength, gave her the strength to love him and herself, of course, in the long, long, hard slog through rehabilitation. And it for us, it truly has been living with a spotlight on, as I have loved you, love one another. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to have another artistic interlude, and I'd like to invite Jenny Benedistinto to... Jenny, can you walk us through your painting? Oh, how great. So just after these paintings, we'll also have a video clip from Adelaide, Yotsna Rao. Thanks, Jenny.
Yep. Hello. Very powerful experience. Thank you for that. Okay, I've been asked to talk about the benefits of art. So I've condensed to a couple of things just to demonstrate how art can work to help cope. So I'm going to begin because it all started with me saying I had paintings that I'd done. And these are my grandparents, my nonna and nono. So I painted these quite a long time ago. So these were painted pretty soon after each passed. So looking at them, so this pretty much probably called recreational art. So we'll go down that path with this type of art. So for me, it was a way to cope with their passing. So validating all that they meant to me, all the things that they taught me, and my experience being with them through life, through their life. So they speak for themselves, really. I'm not going to talk too much about those paintings, but it is really about my individual thoughts, feelings and memories of these two people. And that's just demonstrating art, what art can do for the individual. So it's expressing thoughts and feelings and memories. So going from that, I thought then, well, I'll link it in with what I actually do as my work. I'm an art therapist, so I facilitate group sessions with women diagnosed with breast cancer. So it's an extension of the recreational in the sense that you are working with more a structured process of the art. So that encourages a lot more depth in helping you to cope with issues and problems. So what I'm going to do is there will be a bit of a PowerPoint of images that I got permission from women in a session to put up. And also I got them to write an expression of their thoughts participating in art therapy. So it goes quite nicely with each photo that you'll see. So I'll just, for anyone who doesn't know what art therapy is, I'm just going to really quickly explain. There is so much more, but that's okay. So what is art therapy? Art therapy is a therapeutic process which incorporates art as the path to understanding a problem or issue. It offers those involved to discover and realise hidden values and life resources. Processes used in art therapy help to bring this knowledge forward into day-to-day life experiences and transform it into a coping mechanism. So art therapy is a combination of art. It can be a combination of art, music, meditation and movement. Art therapy works towards accessing conscious and unconscious thoughts and feelings. Art therapy is not about how good or perfect the art is. It is always about the process and what that journey evokes for each individual. And you'll see what I mean when these pictures go up. So we'll show. So visuals always are good. It's very much an experiential thing, art therapy. It's hard to explain unless you actually sit in on one. So our first image, and I'll just go through. So this was a clay process. So, and the theme, there's always a theme. So there's a process and there's a theme. So the theme for this one was to give yourself a gift. Okay, so this person did this piece, which is quite lovely, and that's a mother and child in there. So we'll go on to the next slide. So this is in the middle of them. They're just thoughts and feelings, not particularly about the pictures. They're just the experience of being in a session. So I feel like it has opened a whole new world of feelings and emotions and helped me stay strong and positive. So we'll go to the next. So this is another process, which I just call painting process. So this actually links in beautifully with our theme here, from darkness to light, in the sense we began with the darkest colour, black, and we made our way to white. So it evoked from the darker thoughts through to the more awareness of what was needed for them. And art therapy is very much about in the moment. So everything is in the moment, what is needed for you in that moment. So that was, thoughts and feelings around a colour. So each colour they used, there was thoughts and feelings. So we'll go. So another comment was, it has helped to acknowledge my individual journey, which was quite nice. And then we'll go to the next. So this one is a watercolour process, and the theme is being with change. So we don't have to necessarily understand what's going on here. It really is just the expression of the person. So the next one is, it gives me a safe place to think what I need to think. And a big part of art therapy is about creating that safe space that they feel they can express what they need to express. So we'll go to the next. So this one's a nice one too. I call it painting with clay. So it's actually a special clay that they can actually just place onto paper and create an image. So this one was around thoughts and feelings around the seasons. So that was quite nice. And then art therapy creates positive energy and is fun. So that was quite nice to come forward. So we'll go to the next one. This is a bit more involved. This was quite a lot of energy goes into this piece. So this is called the mask process. So we all wear very different masks as an individual. So it was identifying pretty much 5 in the end, different masks that we might wear in day-to-day life and living, and their thoughts and feelings around that. So this session allowed me space to release, feel free, have no responsibility, and just let go. And there's a lot of that, just letting go and just being in the moment. So last 2, which is they're 2 of the same. So this is on 3D symbol process. So they began by painting, and the theme was what is home for you? So it came up very different for everybody, but this person was obviously with the family. So they did the painting first, and then I asked them to choose symbols to go with the painting, and it just added another level of dimension for them and awareness with their piece. So the last one is also the same theme, very different, and but also very powerful in their awareness of what is important for them in travelling through their illness. So thank you.
I believe someone is going to read Jyotsna's experience. She's in the middle with her husband and son, I think, or...
Hello everyone, my name is Jyotsna, and I joined the Adelaide Focolare group in 2004 when Vasant's colleague, Grace, asked us to join a Word of Life meeting at their place. At the time, I was working at Queen Elizabeth Hospital as an obstetrics and gynecology registrar. I was not prepared for the long and wet cold weather, particularly when I had to drive in the rain to get to emergency calls at the hospital day and night. I was not able to cope with the constant calls from the hospital and my duties at home. There was a point that I had to choose between my career and my family. In the end, I chose my family, but it had a toll on my health. I went into depression as I lost my identity for which I had worked all my life. I had to face my sense of failure every day. This was the time that Focolare came into my life. I still remember the warmth that I felt as soon as I was introduced to all in the group. I felt welcomed. I saw people sat in a circle to read a passage from the Gospel, and Kiara explaining how we can live that in our daily lives. She made it easy to see that what I am going through, the pain and the suffering I felt, is part of God's plan for greater things to come. Over the years, I got a lot of support from the Fokolare group, be it helping my son Vivek with going to India as part of a group, or bushwalking, having cooking workshops, or picnics. Members of Fokolare helped our family to integrate into the Australian culture. These and many more are examples of acts of love that we have received from the group. Most of all, they listened without judgment. I realize that when we communicate honestly in the presence of God, we can heal. This helps to build our unity with one another and with God. Now, personally, I found courage to believe in myself and in God's love for me. To rebuild my career, I went back to uni and studied nursing and work now at the RAH. I believe that God works wonders through each and every one of us. Today, I can proudly say that I am part of a loving family. In my free time, I paint. This painting is a reflection of unity of cultures. The three hands are of Vivek, Vasant, and myself, representing ancient Indian paintings on the new houses. Southern Star and red, white, and blue represent Australia, and Ashoka Chakra, orange, green, and white, represent India. The whole painting is done in Aboriginal dot painting pattern. This is a representation of my love for the multicultural society that Australia is today. I am thankful to Fokolare Group for helping me to reach this conclusion. Thank you and God bless. Jyotsna Rao.
Thank you. I'd now like to invite John Spillane to come up and share a slightly different angle on being a health professional.
Thank you. Thank you to the organising committee for allowing me to come and speak today. My name's John Spillane. Just for those of you who don't know me, I'm a doctor. I've been a doctor for nearly a quarter of a century, started my medical career nearly 30 years ago. I trained as a doctor, and when I got my basic degree, I then trained to be a surgeon. Then after becoming a surgeon, I then subspecially trained in cancer surgery. So it's a fairly long, arduous road. When they asked us to speak today, asked my wife, and my wife's also a doctor, to speak today, we both said, well, that's very nice, but this is about chronic disease and disability. And we said, neither of us work in that area, you probably should go and find someone else. We can't speak on that topic. And then they came back to us and said, well, look, why don't you talk about just the spirituality of the Fokolare and how that helps you in your day-to-day doctoring? And only one of us could come today, so I've come sort of representing both of us. But I'm going to talk about things from my perspective. And you'll see why in a moment. I'm going to use a lot of Fokolare terminology as I go along. So if people are new to the Fokolare and you don't understand the terminology, sing out. I'll rephrase things in a different way because you'll understand as I go along. So I'm going to talk really about two things. I'm going to talk about listening, which is what the topic is, how you listen as a doctor. And I'm going to talk how the spirituality of the Fokolare and the spirituality of being a Christian has affected me over this journey. Now, becoming a doctor is a no-brainer. You all know this. It requires a lot of work. There's a lot of sacrifices. There's a lot of things you had to actively say, I'm not going to do because I've got to study. Now, as a young gen, when I was in my late teens and my 20s, that left me with a real dilemma because the gen of the youth of the Fokolare, and at that time in Melbourne, they were incredibly active. They were fundraising. They'd be going off overseas to help people in Fiji at Mariapolis, off to Rome. They'd be all over the place doing stuff always. And I was constantly getting, there's this on, can you do? There's this on, can you do? And then that left me with a real dilemma because you've got to go, if you think back, and it looks simple now, but if you go back to that time, okay, they're all doing something really, really concrete to serve God. And what am I doing? I'm sitting in a room by myself and I'm reading books. What's loving God? And that's a really hard thing when you're at that age to really get a grasp on. What's God's purpose? How am I really loving? Am I really loving God by sitting by myself? No. And that's a real battle. And it's a battle I had for many, many years. So I got through my medical degree and I was still umming and ahhing about this. What should I do after that? And I thought, look, I was wondering whether I should train to be a surgeon. And I knew that was going to be a really, really long and very, very difficult road to get down because there's lots of exams, but there's also other hoops and hurdles you've got to get over to get through. And I could do other things which would be a little bit less work and I could spend more time doing all this other stuff. And I think that might be a better way to serve God. And then I'd set my year up in 95 to go to the GenFest. And it took about 18 months of planning, but I went to the GenFest. At the GenFest, Chiara came up with a couple of statements that really struck me. And one was she said to the Gen, don't settle for the crumbs. And that's a really profound statement when you think about it. And that really hit me because I could see she was telling the Gen, look, don't settle for small things, to aim high. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I need to think about. Maybe I should aim high. The second thing she came up with was, if you're following God, you've often got to take the hard road. There's the easy road and there's the hard road. Weighing that together, okay, then training for surgery is going to be a hard road. Now, that also sounds simple, but I actually at that time really actually doubted I had the ability to be a surgeon anyway. I didn't think I was going to be good enough. So I'm going to put a lot of time away for something that I'm probably not going to get there anyway. So I then put that into God's hands and I said, well, okay, look, if God wants me to get there, he'll get me there. Okay, it's in his hands. If he doesn't want me to get there, that's fine. That's okay, I'll accept that. It's not a big deal. But then I have to do my part. And my part means I have to work as hard as I possibly can. And that would mean I'm going to have to give up an awful lot of things and turn down doing a lot of things because there's this long-term goal. And when we turn long-term, it was probably 8 years to get my basic surgery degree and then probably another 5 years. So we're talking more than a decade we're putting aside. But when you say long road, it was long. And it was very hard. I spent most of my 20s working every second weekend, the entire weekend in a hospital. In fact, the Gen used to enjoy ringing me on Friday nights at about 2 o'clock in the morning, say, what are you doing? What do you think I'm doing? It's dark, I'm at work, and I'm in a hospital looking after people. What are you doing? Oh, we're at the pub enjoying ourselves. Thanks very much. So that internal battle went on for many years, but I sort of worked through that, trusting in God that God would get me there. But that battle has never actually ended. It's still on to this day. You know, I'm always getting demands on my time, and you can't say yes to everything. You've got to make a choice. And so very much being a doctor has to then become the spirituality that you live. You can't race off to Rome to a meeting, but I can love the patients. That has to be my aspect of working God. Because if you don't do that, your brain explodes from trying to work out how you're going to, how do you get through each day. So let's come to then the spirituality of how you go at work. So the simple way to look at it is, look, every patient that you meet, every person is Jesus, and there's someone to love. And so if you're loving them to the level that you love Jesus, you've put yourself on you're aiming very high in how you're going to look after the world, because everybody's got to be looked after at that level. And it's quite a standard that you put yourself up. We'll come back to that. We'll come on to listening now. Listening's pretty easy. You've all been to the doctor, I'm assuming. You go to the doctor, you sit down in the room, there's you, the doctor, you talk, doctor listens, doctor tells you what to do, everybody happy, you go out the door. Listening's pretty straightforward. The problem is, when you're a specialist, and I work predominantly in public health, as you get more senior, you get more things to do. You get more admin. I'm a surgeon. I lead a team. I live in an operating theatre. So I have 6 or 7 people in theatre, all under me. I've got to tell them what to do. And I can if I come in a bad mood, I can dictate the mood of the operating theatre. So it's really important how you approach. So everyone in that room needs to be loved at the same level as Jesus, not just the patients. I also involved in teaching. I teach the future surgeons of this country and some other countries as well. So it's important also that I've got all these other people who need to listen to. It's not just the patients, it's the clerical staff, it's the other doctors, it's staff members. They all need to be listened, they all need to be loved at the same level of Jesus. That's okay. The other problem, if I walk out of my outpatient clinic room, you open the door, walk out, I will usually see about 2 or 3 people waiting there wanting me to do something. And it's quite frequent that I have to be in 2 or 3 places at once. Now, many of you imagine in your jobs, if you get 3 appointments all booked at the same time, you go, look, that's silly. We'll cancel these, we'll delay those. Lovely. But you can't do that as a doctor. Because at the end of the line is often a patient, and if I say, well, I can't do that, the patient suffers. So you can't do that. So you just have to be in 3 places at once. So there's a constant time pressure. So when you're speaking to the doctor one-to-one, the doctor's actually got, I've got 2 operating theatres I've got to run, and I'm in the outpatient clinic. We're running behind because you're actually chatting more than I had anticipated because you came in with another problem. And you've got to listen to this person, and you've all seen it. How many people have been to see a doctor and they've said, the doctor was a bit rushed today and they're rushing me out the door, or the doctor didn't seem like they were listening, or the doctor looked at his watch. You've all seen it, haven't you? It's not because the doctor doesn't care, it's because the doctor has probably got another 20 people. If you think, if I need to be in 3 places at once, it's not 3 people, it's 3 teams. So there might be 15 or 20 people who all need to be loved at the level I've said of Jesus. So we're aimed 15 people, all need to be loved at exactly the same level. How do you cope with that? A lot of doctors don't, is the reality. And I can really sympathise with that last talk you just heard. Someone gave up their career because the struggle of dealing, I've done that. I've done that too. I've been called out of bed in all sorts of weathers to come in at all. It's really, really hard. How do you cope with it? Well, one thing I used to do was try and live the present moment. So the person in front of you, yes, there are 20 people who want me at the same time, but the person in front of me is the most important. So I've got to love them to the best of my ability, knowing that they're taking too long to get through what they have to tell me. I'm running late. I'm late for all these other people. But I can't give that impression to that person. They've got to feel when they walk out the door that they have been loved at the absolute level that they possibly can. And then once we've solved that problem, I run on to the other 3 or 4 problems that are all waiting for me. So that's one of the dilemmas that you get through, and that's how I sort of get through that. One of the areas, as I said, I work in at the start is I work with cancers. It's a really special area to work in because cancers are quite different. Every patient who comes to see me with a cancer is facing their mortality. And it doesn't matter how easy, how sort of simple or early the cancer is to how difficult it is, they all will go through the phase of thinking that they are going to die and they're off to see their maker. I've only ever had one patient who was happy to go off and see his maker. He was a religious brother. He'd been a brother for nearly 60 years. He was ready to go. Unfortunately, God didn't call him quickly. It took another 18 months. He kept coming into clinic saying, I haven't gone yet, doctor. He's Irish. Haven't gone yet, doctor. Haven't gone yet. No, don't worry. Everybody else is not wanting to go. Forget this euthanasia debate. People don't want to go. They don't want to leave. They want to be here. And so, although I might have seen the same problem, the same patient 1,000 times, and I know that their problem is quite minor, it is a cancer, it's minor, I know I can treat it, and I know I'll cure them, and they'll all be fine. But for that person, they're facing the end of their life. That's what they think. No matter what you tell to them, you've got to, that's what they're dealing with. And that's a really profound thing. So you've got to really love and really listen to all these people as best that you can. The other thing with listening, it's not often what's spoken. You've got to look for what's not spoken. It's a subtle body language. You ask a patient a question, but you look at the person sitting next to them, their family member, because you'll get a different response from the family member. And you'll find it often what's really going on by a facial expression of someone else in the room. Often the last thing the person says if they're going out the door is actually what they really wanted to tell you, and that's the most important bit. So then you know as they're walking out the door and they say, oh yes, and you're good, come back, let's sit down, let's actually sort out why you've come to see me. You're delaying me again, I've got another 20 people, but let's not go there. So these are all the battles that you come with as a doctor. How do I cope with all that? Well, often not terribly well. Like all doctors, don't cope well. One of the things I also come back to is one of my gen assistants many years ago was called Terry Gunn. Many of you know him. And I used to say to Terry, look, Terry, you're so wise. You always seem to know the right answer for everything that, I come and ask you. And he says, yeah, John, I'm not wise. He said, I've just made more mistakes than most people. And that's often how I feel. I'm not terribly wise. I just make a lot of mistakes. So I suppose in summary, the spirituality has been very important to getting to me where I am today. As I said, I can really feel for the previous experience. I've been there as well. So the most important thing, I suppose, is just loving Jesus, loving the other person, and loving everyone. That's really the crux. And if you remember that, then hopefully you get through each day-to-day problem. Thank you.
Thanks, John. It's very, very real. This next one, we have on the cube, we still have a point that's love your enemy. Maybe we'll rephrase that, or maybe, but we'll see from the next experience on whether, Alex, if you want to come up on whether it's really about loving your enemies. I suspect it's not. Now, Alex is going to share his time in Perth working with people with severe mental illness. Is that right? Yeah, take this one.
I'm really here just to introduce a video that was presented by. So some years ago, I was in the Focolare in Perth, and there was a young man, Alan, which you'll see. He started a little, I guess, seeing people living with mental illness, and what is it that he could do, I guess. And one of the things was that he really had a great belief in community, in sharing people's life. And he encountered through a volunteer about the spirituality of the Focolare. So he made some inquiries, I guess, and we started to do a Word of Life. So once a month, myself or Mario or Stephen or whoever, or well, who was there? There was Ida, and so it was somebody would go and help with that. And one of the things after some years, I also went and worked with him. We're both helping out, I guess, building this community. Initially started with only about 4 people, just one house. At the moment, it's reached 40 people, and it's for the last I heard, there's couple of more houses being built. So it's a journey that has been going on for quite a number of years. But I'll just read you a little sentence that Chiara responded to a letter that Alan wrote to Emmaus, to Chiara. This was in 2005. Sorry about that. New technology. So it says, so this is Chiara's writing. This is in 2005 to Alan. It gave me great joy knowing of your profound and fraternal relationship, which you started with the Word of Life meetings between the Emmaus community, that's the name that the community is named, and the Focolare. So it was a real, for us at least, for me, it was this working with another group within the church, I guess, sharing our spirituality with others, and so it was a mutual relationship also as a movement between the both. So, thank you.
If you can remember someone's name and you know their story, miracles can happen, and they do, because I've seen them. We have created a community where people can live with the right level of support. We want each person to grow in their own time, and that's what is the uniqueness about Emmaus.
When I came to Emmaus, the amount of respect and tolerance that Al had for us was really good. And he gives you space. He's not standing over trying to change your life, but Al just gives you the space to do what you want to do, which is really refreshing.
When I first encountered Emmaus, I imagined it to be a hostel, type environment where young people with mental illness can come and recover and then go. But what I found out was that it's a home, and that people can come here and live here in a community with all the support around them and company that they need to help them recover.
We want appropriate accommodation to be set up for our patients that would allow them to thrive and live independently as much as possible, that will allow for their quality of life to be the best it can possibly be.
We've created a place where people at Emmaus can flourish. Hospital visits are less. The severity of illness and length of illness are less.
Emmaus, I found, was a totally new model of mental health, in that the model promoted a more home-style environment.
I think Emmaus model is exceptional and it's very successful. Having home, it's the most important thing in anybody's life.
People see Emmaus as a special place because everyone calls it home.
When Alan built this room for me in my little flat and everything, I realised, hey, I am loved. And I never had that in my life before. I never had love. I never had security. And I finally realized, yes, I am loved. This is my home. The soul of Emmaus is love. Love and trust. We are all loved and we are all respected.
I think Emmaus is magical. It is like a giant, loving, supporting, caring family that is there for you through thick and thin, through good and bad.
When I came here, my life really started to change, and I started to paint and draw, and I can honestly say that Emmaus has saved my life.
Emmaus is now growing, and it's doing well in the sense of growth of people. We're growing together. Now we want to share that growth with others. That's what we want to do. We want to share it with people in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Darwin, all over, maybe all over the world. We want to share this ideal, and an ideal that works, with others. That's what we want to do.
To finish up, we've got Kevin Kelly with One Last Experience. He's making his way up, so yeah.
Thanks very much. My wife told me to read this, and I always do what my wife tells me. Some years ago, a group of us of men were meeting together and trying to live the Focolare spirituality of unity. We saw together that we could be doing something concrete for our society. One of us knew of a place for homeless alcoholic men called The Way. So some of us went to work there as volunteers. These men had been living on the street but were now too old or unwell to cope any longer. Working there as volunteers, we got to know these guys really well. They had no pretensions. They were still drinking and came in to sleep and sometimes eat. I got to know one Irish chap named Paddy really well. Although he was Irish, he had fought for the British during the war. He was a lovely chap, but just could not stop drinking. Like many ex-soldiers, he could not cope with normal life. He told me once that during the war he used to aim at the enemy's legs so he would not kill them. That's the sort of guy he was. He got very ill, and I was sleeping over this night and really conscious that Paddy was not too well. When I went in to see him, he passed away. I rang one of the Jesuit priests who supported us, with whom I had a good relationship. He came and gave Paddy the last rites, and together we washed him and prepared him for burial. And as he lay there naked between us, I just couldn't help saying, "This just looks like Jesus taken now from the cross." The suffering Jesus was now at peace. There was a doctor from St. Vincent's, a beautiful man, who used to call in and help them in any way I could. One of the things you learn at the Focolare is how to see Jesus in the other person, and it gives you the ability to form a relationship with anybody. I got on very well with him. We shared a lot about the men. He told me that St. Vincent's wanted to start up a place where people could safely come off alcohol, but in a non-medical environment. There was a successful model for this running in Sydney. Peter asked me if I'd be interested in running this facility. Eventually, after seeing it with my wife and getting 3 years leave from the Federal Public Service, I applied for the role and was given the job of director. St. Vincent's were fantastic and supported me through the drug and alcohol clinic and through the board. Over time, thanks to the Focolare, I developed a close relationship with the staff of the clinic and their boss and with the hospital board. After a lot of community consultation, we opened the centre in an old pub in Fitzroy. Pretty apt. Filling the staff was very, very interesting. My assistant was a trained nurse with a lot of experience in the area. After consulting widely, we chose the staff who are a mixture of trained professionals and ex-alcoholics. These ex-alcoholics were wonderful people and a real boon to the staffing. Because of their own suffering and experience, they understood where the admitted clients were coming from and how they were suffering during the withdrawal stage, which was a huge experience for most clients. These ex-alcoholics were very spiritual people, and working with them I felt a real bond and a sense of unity of purpose. They were very honest with themselves and with each other. Nearly all of them had obtained their sobriety through AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and its 12-step program. They were ruthless in their self-assessment and refused to give in to resentments and negative feelings. Sometimes I wondered if God had allowed alcoholism to exist to create such beautiful human beings. They accepted the suffering of being alcoholic. They never said they were cured, just recovering, and knowing for a fact that they were just one drink away from losing everything. But having accepted that, they sought to turn everything to the positive by helping others who were drinking themselves to ruination. It was a real privilege to work with them. I remember once in a difficult staffing situation, seeing with one and what we should do. Jim, who was acting deputy at the time, said, "What would the master do?" I felt his remark was a reflection of the unity we had, that he was able to express what guided his heart. At one stage I felt there was a lack of patience with repeat clients. A lot of the places around Fitzroy, when they saw how well we treated people, they used to send us their clients to dry out, and often they'd get their health back, and they'd sober up, and then they'd go back to their old ways. this was pretty difficult for the ex-alcoholics who invested so much time and in effort in bringing them back to health and knowing themselves how important it was for them to stay off the grog. In my relationship with them, I was able to share my ideal of seeing, or our ideal of seeing every person anew the next time they come in, just to see them as though it was the first time they came in. So most of them did this, even though it was a real suffering for them. We had a victory when one fellow who had the record for the number of admissions decided to give up the grog, and it was an absolute miracle. And but it really brought home the case to them that everyone could make it was worth treating as though they were there for the first time. And this guy made a complete recovery and actually started working in the field himself. Families would often bring their members in to get help. Often they were very judgmental, and we felt it was important to explain the situation as similar to a patient suffering from disease and how they could support them in their recovery and give them assistance in tapping into community assistance. Once we explained this point of view, they became more positive and supportive. One of the things in the whole lesson for me was the importance of suffering and how people grew through it. Even the so-called professional staff that we had, seeing the way the ex-alcoholics accepted their suffering and worked through it, really brought home to them how important that was, that they could do the same thing themselves. And they really, all of us together, built such a strong relationship there, and really helped us to be more human in the way we responded to any situation. After 3 years at the centre, my wife and I had a new baby. So I felt it was time for me to move back to a less demanding environment because of her health, where I could better support her. I left the centre in good hands, but I always remember the suffering of addicted persons and the wonderful people who are serving them. I just wanted to add one little 10-second gift to you. When we're working at this, and some of the people are still working there at that place for homeless alcoholics, men. Remember one guy who didn't seem to be very open, but we kept loving him and kept looking after him as well as we could. I remember one night, a few days before he passed away, I went into his room and he was sitting bolt up in his bed with his arms ready to embrace someone. I don't know how Jesus was going to come to him, but he was ready for it. So I thought, what a wonderful way to die. Thank you.
Okay, so that's all the experiences we have for the afternoon on the Cube of Love, and I think now just want to thank you for coming, and thank you for those who are linked up. The Skype links will be finishing now, and
perhaps we can farewell them. So here we are. We can say farewell to the Wellington Focolare. There we see our left. Goodbye, all. Fielding is on the right. There.
We're going to have time, but we've got some feedback forms, so if people would like to fill them out and share any impressions, experiences, any ideas. There's a few questions, and that would be a gift for us. Get some feedback on how you found the afternoon.
Thank you to you all. Yes, we're very interested in knowing your own impressions, and we welcome them. Thanks very much for being here. It's great to be with you.